Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm down here at the Dawson Creek District Chamber of Commerce, chatting here with Kathleen Connolly, the Executive Director. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Good. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So Kathleen, for those of us who don't know exactly what a Chamber of Commerce is, you can find them in every city basically, but what exactly do you do here?
So a Chamber of Commerce's job is to represent business. That's the simplest form of it. We do stuff like advocating to different levels of government, industry, and other key stakeholders on issues that matter to our businesses in the community. We bring in educational stuff, networking opportunities, and policy. We are big on policy. So our job really is to find supports and provide mentorship and resource allocations for our members. So if they need something, we try and find resources for them.
So if you do have a business in Dawson Creek, you'd probably want to get in touch with you?
Whether you're a member or not, we will always offer advice and referrals to appropriate agencies or resources. We have about 300 members, business members in the community, and so it's a great way to support your fellow businesses and allow us to get out and do our job in representing you. So yes, become a member.
And something that I wanted to chat with you a little bit about today is that the businesses here in Dawson Creek are seeing some change. We've noticed some difference in the atmosphere around Dawson Creek. A lot of the hotels are a lot busier than they have been in the past few months, maybe even in the past year. What the heck is going on?
So we're seeing a big jump in infrastructure development, particularly in the oil and gas sector. So we're seeing a lot of pipelines going into the ground. We're seeing a lot of facilities being built. Some are water hubs or water treatment facilities or water facilities, and the other is really around the liquids hubs. So we've talked about liquids in the past and how they pull that off of the natural gas and sell those. So that we're seeing in Kenna, Murphy, some of those other key players are building that sort of infrastructure right now. So they're big, massive projects that require just a ton of labor. So it is very good for us, and we are definitely seeing an increase in that. We know that some pipelines are starting to come, projects are starting to come to an end, but we do know that TransCanada has got two pretty major projects coming in. So they've got the Bear Canyon project and they've got the Tower Birch project. So we expect that those will, the Tower Birch, I think they're talking will go into next year. So that's more of a longer term project. Some of the smaller ones are starting to, we see Tourmaline has finished theirs up, and Acon Somerville is coming to an end probably the end of March. They'll probably be done that project. So we are starting to see some filter off, but we're hopeful that more will come online as we sort of move along.
Now you mentioned natural gas liquids. And Canada had recently started development of their South Central Liquids Hub. So we've got this natural gas in the ground, but that one is focused on the liquids, so propane, butane, and condensate. This is all coming from the Montney gas field. Tell us how good the Montney is.
Unbelievably rich. I had no idea, and I think a lot of the producers didn't. So during the downturn, a lot of those bigger companies did a really smart thing. They brought their geologists in and they studied the ground. They took a look what was under there and the formations and the whole geology of it, and they've discovered that there is two really large pools of natural gas that are very liquid rich. So it's not just a little rich, it's like really rich. And then of course the oil that they're talking about in the Tower Lake area, which ARC is aggressively working on processing. So not only do we have the liquid rich part of the Montney, which is not only the south piece, but outside of Fort St. John, sort of the Inga Blueberry area is very rich as well. So I think the interest for producers is that the price of natural gas may not be strong, and it's been known to be very weak, but the value for condensate right now is very high. So places like Fort McMurray, when they're moving their bitumen through pipelines, require that condensate to help move that product through the pipelines. So there's a big demand for it and expected continued growth in it. Of course, we know that America is our biggest customer for our fossil fuels. So I think waiting on the Trump administration to make some of those key decisions will be an important piece of the puzzle to finish it off for producers. But it is very exciting, and the future looks very strong in that industry, and particularly in those liquid rich areas.
So Kathleen, we've covered off kind of how rich this area is when it comes to natural gas. A lot of people in the region have been waiting desperately to hear any news about LNG. So basically taking what we got in the ground, liquefying it and sending her on a ship over to Asia. We're still waiting for a final investment decision from Petronas on whether they're even going to build Pacific Northwest. What's your opinion on this?
LNG, I think, I'm uncertain, and I think that a lot of people are. I think that the regulatory process was very long and arduous for those companies that were wanting to build here. We do need to remember that Woodside in Squamish is going forward, so there is a very small LNG plant that is being built and will be sending out its product. But I think in the bigger scale, there's a few things beyond the regulatory component, and probably the biggest is what's going on in the world market, the global market for LNG. So we seen yesterday, it was reported that Sabine Pass, which is an LNG facility in Louisiana, signed a contract with a Montney natural gas producer to pipe our natural gas to the Sabine Pass in Louisiana and across the ocean. So our Chamber of Commerce, our position from day one has been, if that project that happens, that's great. If any of them happen, if we can get our natural gas in a pipeline to anywhere in the world, we're totally good with that. But we were very careful with our members and said, you really need to be careful about how you're investing, how you're pushing your capital and your assets to that project. And we would suggest you don't do anything until you get a signed contract that says that it's a go. So I think we're a long way out. I mean, even if there is a FID in April, which is the rumor, we wouldn't see LNG headed out of our province for probably 6 or 7 years. So it's a long way out. So I think we're much better off right now looking at those other markets and supporting those other markets.
So for now, our natural gas will not be liquefied. We're going to keep it in its gaseous state where it's doing just fine. Let's talk a little bit about what else the region has going. What's going on in forestry? So
forestry has been very strong. They had an interesting fall. It's that whole conversation about climate change. So last fall, we know, was very wet. So loggers were fighting mud. Right up until just around Christmas. So I think that there is some concern right now that if it's a wet spring or a slow spring, that could certainly slow down their ability to get wood out of the bush. But right now, they're doing fantastically well. The mills are pretty much screaming for wood because it was such a slow and hard fall that they're all out. So we're hopeful that the weather agrees with us in the spring and they can continue, but so far very positive for them.
And you mentioned the weather. What are you hearing from farmers and what's going on in agriculture?
So there's a few things, and so I come from a farm background, so I have this conversation at my mom and dad's kitchen table every morning. So they're cattle producers. So they've lost a calf this spring already because it's icy and a mama cow slipped, hit the ice and lost her baby. So I think there is some concern amongst farmers, particularly animal producers, so sheep, cattle, etc., that the ice could, hurt some of their livestock. So I think they're being very careful about trying to manage that part of it. I think that, and then for the hay, there's concerns that some of those roots and stuff like alfalfa may have froze because we didn't have as much snow this winter and more ice. So I think there is some concerns about how that forage will look come springtime. And our grain producers, my understanding is that they're sending out grain at a very nice rate. So they seem to be doing okay. There was that loss last fall, and so I think in the spring they'll have to decide how they want to manage those crops that they weren't able to get off. But right now, there's just nothing they can do about that. So in general, I think that all of the industries in our area are stable. We know that mining is picked up, and for those that might be interested, Canuma Coal is coming in to do a presentation to our chamber in April. But right now, they're hiring more people and really exciting things happening in Tumbler Ridge. So I feel like in general, the economy is stable. And what I would say for our retailers is whenever you come out of a slump, a low, it takes time for that economy to trickle through to all of the sectors in that retail chain. So I would say that sort of the first level of service providers to oil and gas or industry, forestry, any of those industries, the parts suppliers, the fuel suppliers, those guys hotels, restaurants are definitely seeing a bump. I think some of the other retailers, it takes longer. So particularly if some of those companies or employees were running on credit, their first priority would be to clear up the credit, and then they would be able to buy some of those, you know, the luxury items. So I think that that trickle takes time, but there's definitely a feeling of relief amongst our retailers that there, you know, that there is hope and that they can sort of plan for that trickle effect to get to them. So in general, I feel like we're all feeling pretty good.
In general, they're just very different from things how they were a year ago. That's
the great thing about living in a resource part of the world, is that, you know, we don't really make the decisions. Somebody in another country who's using one of our resources makes those decisions, and our economy is, you know, really based on that. So for example, NAFTA, right? That has a huge impact on how all of our businesses, all of our industries would be affected. Our cattle go to feedlots in America, our lumber does, our grain does, our fossil fuels do. So I think, you know, sometimes we're at the mercy of the global market, and highs and lows are the joys of being a resource economy.
And lucky for us here in Dawson Creek, we do have the Chamber as a resource. I could just stay and chat with you for all afternoon, but we're going to have to get you to tell us about how people can get more information, because a lot of companies are going to be coming to the Chamber here, and everyone's welcome to join. How can people find out more?
Give me a call, 250-782-4868.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for being on Take 5 with me today.
It's awesome. Come back again.
Absolutely. And I do have to come back because we're at the Alaska Highway House. I haven't actually done the tour this year.
Oh, you must. It's the 75th year. It's a celebration year. Come back.
Perfect. All right, I'll have to make sure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Amanda.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.